Welcome back to this council meeting of the 31st of August. We are now returning to item 10.3 to consider the additional motion proposed by Councillor Coe, and I believe we have some words that are going to be put up on the screen around this. Just give everybody, I'll read it out. That council notes that option 1 is a preliminary stage to further strategic investment stages to be considered as part of the long-term plan. And council note that this work will be closely linked to wider work around town centre invigoration. Do we have any questions of staff around that? Okay, so Liz, you're going to move it, and Councillor Wilson is going to second. Right of introduction, Councillor Coe. Hang on, wait for the microphone. You might need to press the button.
Of course. Okay, I just wanted to encapsulate some of the discussion we had in debate, which signals the intention that option 1 just be a preliminary stage that does not preclude further options, and that we do look at some of what those wider options might be as part of the long-term plan. And I guess I haven't specifically mentioned this in the wording, but option 3 and option 4 would be included as part of that process. And I guess the intention is that we will look at cost, feasibility and relative priority of this further investment as against other priorities in the long-term plan, because we know we have restricted funds available to council. We are very conscious of the impact on ratepayers of further capital expenditure. So we need to be prudent about how much we spend on the library versus other competing priorities. So the suggestion is that we know we've got funding for option 1. Let's proceed with that and consider just realistically how affordable is it to go wider than that, as was preferred by a reasonable proportion of the population who were consulted with, I should say. I guess also picking up on some comments around the revitalisation of Mahara Place, and just to acknowledge that there is work continuing in that vein. And so what we propose to do in terms of the library development will be looked at in the context of what happens with that other work that's being done.
Thank you. I'll open that up for general debate now. Anybody else want to speak? Councillor Cooper, I've got next.
Yeah, I was just, in terms of that work going forward, I would like to see in that conversation models that look at low OPEX loading. We see in options 2 and 3 approximately $450,000 in operating expense, which equates to 0.5% of a rates hike, which is an ongoing cost. So as with other projects, it's not necessarily the capex cost of the development, it's the enduring cost moving forward of running them. So certainly would be my preference to look at not necessarily, if we're opening this up as a strategic investment moving forward, you almost have to go back to move away from the options 2 and 3 and 4 and actually look at it with a clear lens with the low operating model moving forward. That would be I'm happy to support this because it signals an intent, but I think that intent would need to be really thrashed out, almost back to the start of what that would look like moving forward as part of that conversation.
Councillor Pravanov.
I thank you through the chair. So as Councillor Cooper have just said, we don't actually know what the scope of this is, and so we're actually, if it's outside the remit of looking at a library, we're actually making a decision on not actually knowing what we're actually looking at. I know that there've been conversations around at various times. Not everyone is actually party to that, and so I think that if we do agree to this here, we need to define the scope of what we are going to be looking at. The second thing is too, this is all going to be considered for the long-term plan. We've already started that process. And I assume there's actually nothing in there that talks about when this will be done by, and I think there needs to be. So in the paper as it stood today, that was going to be by the end of October. So I think it's important that we have a time frame in there so we actually know what, basically we've been provided with the information so that we can actually use that going forward and to balance it with all the other considerations we're going to have to make for our long-term plan. I suppose the other thing is too, from what I'm hearing, is this is extending the scope of just looking solely at the library, which to me automatically means an increase in funds, which people are already concerned about.
Thank you.
So, is it appropriate at this point in time to put a time frame upon which this information will be returned to us?
So the mover of the motion isn't accepting that as an alteration to these?
So then how are we going to actually how are we going to make decisions on the long-term plan process, which have already started, on what's going to come out of this if we don't actually know what's going to come out of it?
So, what we've said is that we want to consider it through the long-term plan process. It will be slotted into there as part of that process. I don't think we can put a date on it or a time, but
saying
so
that,
I think we'll move on.
Saying that though, the end of October was going to consider these
We're no
options.
longer considering those recommendations.
That is correct, but a time frame was given as at the end of October, which was considered to be something that could be worked to. So why is that an option, not an option now?
Because we've decided on a different course of action, but I won't answer any more questions. I think the mover of the motion is satisfied that this will be slotted into the work program as required. Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, just in supporting this, you can see this allows for a lot of synergies with Toi Mahara. It allows for consideration in the long-term plan, and I wouldn't be putting any timelines around it. It's just because that's too prescriptive. It's kind of an open book. When we had October as a report back time, I think the guts of that was obviously going to be option one anyway, so that had already been done. I'm also concerned about the potential constraint on resources for doing this. So if you're probably going to be asking the same team who are going to be involved in building the library, which we've just voted unanimously to do, it's probably going to be the same people that would be involved in having to come up with the stuff for the LTP. So yeah, there are some timing issues around that. I'm completely satisfied that this meets the objectives that we're looking to, what further developments might be.
Great. Right, a reply? Hang on.
I'd just like to address some of the concerns that were raised. I think the issue about affordability is very much, it's not just the CapEx, it's the OpEx as well, and that's something that would need to be considered as part of the long-term plan. It goes without saying. And it's about the relative merits and priorities of spending on additional development of the library versus other priorities, and where that fits into what we're calling our envelope, if you like, for the long-term plan. And that's something, a discussion that is yet to be had as to what that envelope looks like and what therefore the impact might be on rates. So there is a commitment already, I think, to work within that envelope to ensure that any impact on rates is affordable. And in terms of the time frame, I think we've got room there to do this in parallel and slot things into that long-term planning process as is appropriate without putting pressure on staff, and keeping an open mind as we go through, bearing in mind that the plan will not be finalised until sometime next year. So I think this gives us sufficient flexibility in terms of how it's worded that we can take an open-minded view to how we further develop the plans, or the stages for the library development.
Thank you. So I'll put that to the vote. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? That's carried. Thank you. We're building a library. So 10.4, submissions and high-level summary for the draft Easter Sunday trading policy. Thanks, Mike. Sorry. Thank you. Thanks, guys up the back. Submissions and a high-level summary for the draft Easter Sunday trading policy, page 176. We've got Aston coming to the table, Aston Mitchell, and Chris Purvan. Great. I invite you to introduce the report, please.
Hi everyone, so I'm here to talk to you today to provide you with the submissions and the high-level summary for the Easter Sunday shop trading policy, which we finished consulting on the 26th of July. We received 134 submissions for that consultation, which was pretty good. We will have a report for decision for the future of the policy coming to you on the 10th of October. I will now take the report as read and take any questions or feedback that you have. Thank you.
Yeah, so just clarify, we're just having a look at the submissions today and noting the report. Do you have any questions around the submissions or the report? So I'll look for a mover for A and B on page 176.
Sorry,
Councillor
Janet,
Warwick.
just one little thing.
Seconded.
No, quick, very quick question.
Sorry, we'll just find a seconder and then I'll take a question.
That's cool.
So just to keep it tidy. So moved by Councillor Warwick, seconded by Councillor Wilson. So yeah, feel free to ask a question though.
Okay. Sorry, thank you, Madam Chair. Just looking through some of the submissions, some of them are incredibly brief, like absolutely nothing answered except for yes at the bottom or no. Do they have a lower weight in case it's someone trolling or trying to spam the submission process? I was just curious because of the fact that there seemed to be quite a few there that just literally only had yes there and that was it. So how much weight do they have?
So each submission is linked to an individual. It's just that their personal information hasn't been published on here, but the council does hold records on who they are. So each person has they have the same rating as everyone else's.
Okay, thank you.
Turns it into a bit of a referendum, doesn't it? So I'll now go to Councillor Warwick for her right of introduction. Waived. Any debate? Okay, so I'll put those to the vote. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against. Carried. Thank you. That one was nice and easy. So we've already covered a 10.5, so we're up to 10.6, selecting the electoral system for local body elections 2025, page 348. And this is a paper that's coming back to us, having rescinded our original decision to hold a poll. I think it's got a few extra bits and bobs added to it as well. So welcome Janice and Sarah. I'll invite you to introduce the report.
Okay.
Oh, Steffi, sorry.
Kia ora koutou. I think you summarised that quite nicely of what's occurred so far, so we'll just take the report as read and answer any questions if you have any.
Any questions? Councillor Wilson.
Just the same one. When we spoke to Gavin Beattie this morning, and the question was raised around comms after the adoption of any system. So, given we adopt the recommendations, then I would hate to think that it just stops there. So, particularly as you get a new tranche of voters coming through, so anyone who's 15 now or 16 now will be able to vote at the next election. So it basically takes the whole of the senior colleges. I would love us to be going into those, following up what Gavin was saying, going into those colleges and just giving them a heads up about this is what STB is. It's brand new to them. They're way smarter than us. They'll adopt to that really quickly. It could be 16-year-olds could be voting at the next election as well. So just in terms of our, as a council, engaging with our community about a voting system, whatever we go for, looks like STB, just to get that into them. And then maybe the retirement villages.
Yeah, so it's kind of an idea rather than a question, but I think it's a good one. It's a very good one. So I have a question. When we had a little chat about this, there was the option of a survey, which isn't included in the report. Maybe you could fill us in on that again, just to refresh our memories. Sorry, Steffi. Sorry, keep looking left because that's what I'm used to.
That's all right. So it's not a recommendation that we've put forward, but it is in the under the options section of the report. So there could be an option to move any of the recommendations. Well, it makes no sense to move option C, but A or B, and then add something to that effect that you'd like staff to consider conducting a survey, and then maybe some timing around that.
Right. Any other questions? I would like to move from the chair then. A1, retain the single transferable voting system, and add something around a survey. I'm just wanting to be true to, so actually, before I debate, maybe I could I'll just move A1 and then we can talk about a survey. So do I have a seconder for A1? Councillor Pravanov. So when we resolved to undertake a poll of electors, that was with a kind of principle of not taking drastic action without consulting our community first. So it doesn't make sense to me to move to first past the post, conduct a survey and then move back again. So I would like to retain the single transferable vote and have a survey. I don't think, do we need to put a time frame around it? Maybe even as part of the next elections, so we don't have to do it separately.
If you are talking about a survey, you could specify that we work with you to do that at some point this triennium, and that could be aligned with election time as well. If you were talking about one of the other options that's explored in the paper, which is a poll to be conducted at election time, which is one of the other things that we talked about, then specifying a date would be important. But if you're wanting the less formal approach of a survey, then I don't believe you need to be specific. We can take that as an action and come back to you with suggestions around timing.
So, how about I'll put some words around something about a survey, but signalling that I'll move something around that if this passes. So that's been moved and seconded. I think I've had my right of introduction. Is there any further debate, Jocelyn?
So I just want to clarify with this 2A, it states here, in accordance with statutory requirements, doesn't that also include that it will state in there that the community have the right to initiate a poll themselves?
Yeah, they do have the right.
And that's what's happened previously, and that's never been taken up.
Correct.
Thank you.
Sorry, we can ask questions at any time, is what I've discovered, so ask away.
Yeah, so that's fine, thank you. And I suppose, actually, while I've got the mic, are staff able to provide any costs of either a poll or a survey?
Yeah, you can answer that. Yeah, Steffi?
100 grand for a poll.
So the cost of a poll, of a standalone poll, is actually included in the report, and if I remember correctly, it's around 130,000. The survey would obviously be a lot cheaper because it doesn't have to align with legislative requirements. The poll is prescribed in the Act, what needs to happen, and within what time frame, whereas the survey, we could basically shape that how we'd like. So it'd be a lot cheaper than that. So, sorry, yep, you were.
I just think it might be helpful to add that the costs associated with the survey might not be attached to the act of running the survey itself, but would potentially be influenced by what degree of communications, information, education activity you wanted to have preceding the survey to be able to help ensure informed feedback to the question. It could be that more costs are attached to that than to the survey itself.
Thank you. So, so what you're saying is
we won't have a train of questions, I don't think, because we are in debate.
Okay.
It's just if you really need a point of clarity around the paper or around what you're voting on, then I think that's really important. But I think the details around how a survey would be run and the costs, etc., would be something that would be sorted out later.
Well, I suppose my question was in relation to a survey. It's not necessarily binding.
No, it's not. No, that's right.
Thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
I personally favour A2, but given that we're discussing A1, Hutt City, as we know, ran a poll, but not a $130,000 poll because it was just part of the election papers. So where, and I may have said this before, an overwhelming number of people favoured first past the post. But were we of a mind to do that, then we could have a poll and at no extra cost. It's just another box on a voting paper. So that might be one of the possibilities. I'm not actually sure. I would take into account what the cost of a survey is, because anecdotally we all do surveys every time we talk to the public about these things, and we know anecdotally that the public, generally speaking, favour first past the post, which is what a survey will show you. So if you're going to spend, it's not $130,000, but whatever a survey costs, it's still going to cost. So whether or not going to the time, expense, energy, etc., of running a survey for what purpose? Because even if the survey said overwhelmingly, oh yeah, first past the post, that's what we want, you're not going to do it in time for the next election anyway, and it's still just a survey. So I'm not even sure that there would be what the point of that would be. I think if you want to do it properly, you'd be better to do a poll, and nobody wants to spend 130 grand ahead of the next election, so the chances are you'd be best to do it during that election process, for what it's worth. But I'll just finish by saying, in the absence of that, even though I personally favour first past the post, in the absence of that, I don't think it would be a good idea to change your voting system without having done a proper consult, and so you wouldn't be able to do that in time anyway. So STV next time round, for those of you who decide to stand.
Councillor Cooper?
Yeah, I must say I'm a little bit bemused. Two meetings ago, we thrashed this out and litigated it, this exact recommendations, unchanged from my reading of it. It was voted on, and then 2 months later it's been rescinded and we're voting on exactly the same thing. You know, to the person watching online, has simply someone not like the result and been doing politicking in the background and got the eggs in a row to get the decision they want.
I'll address that in my right of reply.
Because on the face of it, that's what it appears to me. So I am just a little bit not understanding of this process, and should it even be occurring, is my statement in debate. But yes, we shouldn't be retaining or changing unless we on a constitutional matter, which I believe this is, without going out to the people who it impacts and asking them. Now, 2025 is 2 years away, at least 2 years away. Are we submitting that we'll wait until October 2025 to do anything? Is that what we're saying? But certainly I'd resolve that we should undertake either a poll at that election or some sort of survey prior to the election. But yeah, I don't think anyone else is confused why this is back exactly the same as it was 4 weeks ago.
Councillor Warwick?
I just think it would be really good to know how we're going to go forward with education around STV, because it can actually be used as first past the post. If people know that, they can use it as first past the post and only vote for who they want. But it would be nice to work on some kind of education for people so they actually use it properly to their advantage.
Councillor Halliday?
Through you, Madam Chair. When this task came to the table, I'll freely admit I thought it was going to be a 2-second conversation, and we were just going to maintain the status quo. And there was a bit of a break put on that with regards to Councillor Wilson looking at another option, and I think it just took us all back to. Which is absolutely fine, and which is a democratic right. And what it certainly caused me to pause, to stop and think about the process and that sort of stuff, to think about the two options and that sort of stuff. You know, in reflecting of it, you know, I'm still actually pretty happy with STV. One of the reasons why I'm a little bit not too keen on first past the post is my thoughts around that is that potentially first past the post can be ambushed by political parties with regards to stacking, what I would call stacking votes, in regards to getting either Labour or National or other parties into roles. And to me, one of the great things about STV is it really helps eliminate that option as such. Although I do respect the simplicity of first past the post, I do take into consideration what Graham said this morning, saying engagement is the issue, not the system. And we need to get our people educated. Local government New Zealand is heading towards all councils being STV. So in my view, I'm quite happy to support the current STV option after that consideration. Addressing Councillor Cooper's comments, if you like, we discussed in the interim and we decided that, and the Mayor may cover this off as well, and we decided we didn't want to spend the money on a poll, and that we wanted to just basically have a bit more of a conversation about this and bring it back to the table. Now, at the end of the day, we could agree to have a poll. That's that at this stage. I like the fact that we did have the chance to reflect on this. Could have potentially been done in a workshop in the first instance, but I don't think anyone thought it was going to be contentious, but that's the way things roll as such. So I'll be supporting STV today, but I would think we could potentially use a survey as an educational tool and to get a bit more of a bit of guidance potentially from our community on what their thoughts might be coming into the election and the next election.
Councillor Coe?
Thank you. Look, I believe that the fact that people looking at their voting papers, they get confused about how to rank candidates, and I think there's a related issue here, which is around how we provide information to the public on the candidates. And so I think if we're going to retain the STV system, we need to have a really good think about how we put forward candidate information to the public so that they can make an informed, intelligent and easy decision about how to rank candidates should they choose to vote for more than one person, and to also give them information on how to strategically vote. So I think it's not just a simple case of deciding on the electoral system, it's the whole package of how do we inform people, because every election where I've been president in Kapiti, people have asked me, who should I vote for? Who are the good ones? Who are the not so good ones? They've got no idea, and they find it really hard to rank candidates in order, and therefore that means that side of it is just not working because they don't have enough information to do the ranking, to decide how their votes transfer. So that to me is the big issue. It's not so much about the voting system that we use, it's about how we communicate and engage with the public in elections around the candidate information. That means putting stuff online, providing online platforms, forums, whatever, for candidates to provide more details rather than just a short little paragraph and a dodgy looking photo in an election handbook.
My photo wasn't dodgy, thank you very much, Councillor Coe. Speak for yourself.
Well, there are one or two of them that look like mug shots, I have to say.
So I'm not seeing anybody who hasn't spoken with their light on. Not going to have a back and forth. So with my right of reply.
Can I just have a point of clarity?
Sure.
Madam Mayor? It's just in some respect to what in my dialogue, and then Martin said words to the effect that we've been discussing this, or we've.
No,
and I haven't been in discussion. So is it being discussed with the people who perhaps needed swaying, or there's been dialogue? I think was the correct word. There's been dialogue on this.
So we've had an explanation. And I'm now exercising my right of reply. We've had an explanation that at the last meeting we resolved to undertake a poll. Once councillors had more information on the complexity and the cost of such a poll, there was a desire to bring it back to the table, to rescind that decision, to avoid that cost and complexity, which from memory I think was around $130,000. So that was the reason, no other reason than that. And that was the only thing that was rescinded, was the poll. There was no rescinding of any decision about which system to use. And that was the only reason for it. And around that, councillors asked for some more information, which was provided to councillors. So I don't think it's necessary today to move a particular motion around whether to have a survey or a poll. I think what staff have heard is that we want some education around this, we want some communication around this, and we definitely want to ask our community in one form or another and in a cost-effective way what they would prefer, either before or during the next election. So with that, I'll put this to the vote. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Councillor Cooper, would you like to call a division? No. That's carried. Thank you. Darren says phew. Thank you. Again. Second time lucky, hopefully.
What was that?
So we move now to 10.7.
Madam Chair, can I
Yeah.
just clarify? You said you were going to address the question of a survey or a poll in a separate motion. Is that correct or not?
I decided
we
not to. We'd had a discussion around it. The staff had heard that we want to do something. I think it's fine as it is. If somebody else, in fact, we've moved on from that paper now. So we're on 10.7, reports and recommendations from standing committees and community boards. 364. Steffi.
Through you, Madam Chair, I would like to just take that report as read. There were no recommendations from community boards or other committees.
Do I have a mover that we receive the report? Councillor Warwick, seconded Councillor Wilson.
Sorry, Madam Chair, can I just note one thing on there, just with the Otaki Community Board? The notes there are very, very brief. It doesn't mention the public forum that we had, which I feel is very important regarding the Moy Place development. That's something I would have wanted noted on there, that we actually discussed at length about the Moy Place fast track development.
So could we amend the minutes to that effect? We don't generally report on individual things that happen at community board meetings. There are often public forums and things. Maybe what we need to do, rather than change this in particular, is have a wee look at how much information is in there and see if in general we want more information around what happened at community board meetings to be included.
Yeah, or maybe whether the chairs are asked beforehand if there's anything they wish to note in there. Just to, I'm not saying write essays, but if there's other points, because we ended up moving a motion which then led us to writing a letter to the EPA. So that's, is something fairly significant to note. I don't know.
Okay.
Whether the councillors
I'll
want
go
to
to
know or not.
go to staff for advice. Yeah, so the only recommendations that are included in this report are recommendations to us that council do something.
Okay.
So if you'd requested that council write such a letter, then it would have been included as a recommendation.
Okay. Cool, point taken.
But that's now on the public record,
Yep.
because you've said it today that happened. So that's
Cool.
good.
Thank you.
I mean, that might be a good thing to do, is to invite the chairs to highlight anything that they think's been of particular note when we receive these reports. So thanks, and it's really great the action the community board's been taken advocating on that issue. Councillor Halliday.
Yeah, point of clarity. Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a reports and recommendations from standing committees. I just wanted to know, what is the process of recommendations coming from subcommittees into their respective meetings? Do we have one specifically at the moment? Like if the Social Sustainability Committee said that makes a recommendation, does that get followed through into the, say, Strategy and Operations or Council meeting that it's relevant to as a recommendation, or as something to be considered by the councillors as part of that process?
I didn't understand that question.
I think that's right. I think I understand your question, Councillor. So there are two mechanisms. So if the subcommittee make a resolution they pass a resolution because of a recommendation that has come to them through a report, then it will go to the next step and either come to Council or Strategy, Ops and Finance by way of a report. So it will be a standalone report that will include the recommendation from the subcommittees. However, if there was a resolution passed that had nothing to do with a report from staff, so for example, if it was a notice of motion or any other way, then it would come up in this report. However, that has so far, to date, since the beginning of the Triennium, not happened. So therefore, they haven't been reported on as yet. But we could look at the mechanisms for how that would happen.
Do you want to ask another question, or do you want to argue
It's actually
against that?
sort of another point of clarity, really. I get that. That's great. So if a recommendation is made that's outside the report, how would that get addressed? It would come through here as a recommendation, but then how does it get to the next step? Is that
do we capture it here and do something about it and move it, or
Yeah,
I'm gonna take that offline because that's an ongoing piece of work.
okay, that's
Yeah,
that's
which
cool.
I'm a little bit behind on at the moment. But yeah, thanks for flagging it.
Okay.
And we'll definitely progress an answer to all of that, which isn't easy. It's quite complicated.
No, I think with the subcommittees, they're shaking down a bit. You know, we haven't had one yet, but we just might have one. Something
Yeah.
like that might come up soon.
Sure, good point to raise. Councillor Pravanov.
Thank you, through the chair. So my question's actually a bit of it's in a similar vein to Councillor Halliday's. So item 5 says items discussed at each of the committees listed below. And then, for example, when you look at, and this is just one example, 5.6, the Climate and Environment Subcommittee met to discuss climate action grant summary of applications and recommendations. At that meeting, it wasn't actually just discussing it, it was actually making a recommendation. And I think there's a big difference between discussing and actually making a recommendation. And this applies to a number of these other activities, whether it be a community board, recommendation to council or something else like that. I'm just wondering whether or not the wording there is actually correct.
Yeah. I think that. Yes, sure.
So the reason that staff haven't gone further into this in this report is because that would have come up to Strategy Ops and Finance in its own standalone report. So we can of course discuss, and the Mayor has already alluded to that, how much information we put into this report and what the mechanisms are for items to be put into this report, but that's the reason nothing else is in there.
So, for example, with the Climate and Environment Subcommittee, you could say that we did meet to discuss the climate and resilience standing up tank, which we did, but then it would be more accurate to say that we decided on the action grants applications.
So.
And I suppose it's like the community board.
So I guess the purpose of this report is to identify the key things that went to particular meetings and a high level kind of indication of what was discussed. If anybody wants further information, they can then see the date of the meeting, go to the website, have a look at the minutes or the agenda, and find out more. I just get the feeling today we're just starting to have very increased expectations of what goes into this report. It's basically, this meeting happened at this time, this is what was discussed. Next.
Yeah, I think for transparency,
it's perfectly transparent. It's on the agenda and the minutes and the council website.
Yeah,
we don't have to have all the information in this report.
Doesn't say they're making actually a decision though. Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, I'm perfectly satisfied with this. The bigger question, this may not be the place for it, but it was a little disconcerting. I was at a meeting where the Climate and Environment Subcommittee had made a decision, and then it came to another committee, and it kind of was getting relitigated. And I just wondered about that. So that we have these committees, they've brought in whoever needs to be brought in.
I think we've already established that that's a discussion that we need to have through Martin's question.
In that case, cool.
I don't think now is the time for it.
That's cool.
But I'm glad you flagged it as well, because yeah, we certainly need to have a look at that and address Martin's other question, which was a very good one as well.
Cool.
So I think Steffi's taken a note of those things that we need to talk about, and we'll take them to another forum. Okay, so that's been moved and seconded. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? That's carried. Thank you. So I believe we are on to confirmation of minutes. Right, so we're on page 473, is that right? It's not on my piece of paper. 458, yes, that's right. So we have 11.1, confirmation of minutes. Do I have a mover for those? Councillor Warwick, seconded Councillor Wilson. Do we have any comments or questions around that? So I'll put that.
I do.
Jocelyn, is your light still on from before, or would you
No,
like?
it's not. So I have a question in relation to the motion, and I can't actually find it just now, that Councillor Coe put forward, which said said that everything else was, this is in relation to PC2, that everything else was going to be accepted except what was on the table 1, which was on the screen. I'm seeking clarification that the words that I had put up there are also included in that actual, included in that recommendation, those points. So I've actually talked to...
I don't think those words ever did manage to get included in the end at the meeting.
They were actually on the screen.
They weren't. Anyway, but somebody else might want to clarify.
So just remember, it's a chaotic day, and that I think Councillor Kirby had some words that were put up onto the screen, and then I added some words later that were also put up onto the screen. Then we had a break, and then we came back from the break. Councillor Coe did a procedural motion, I think it was.
No, that was moved and seconded before the break.
But the word, if you actually look at the wording,
it needed to be an amendment after the break.
If you actually look at the wording in what she suggested, it said, except for the rejected recommendations identified in table 1. That's exactly, I'm reading what it is, B2 on page...
and at that point, table 1 didn't include your words, I'm afraid.
It did.
It did?
It did.
It didn't. No.
Okay.
No. So I'm going to put that to the vote. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against. That's carried. Thank you. So now we're going into public excluded. Thank you, everybody online and other people who are here, for your attendance. And we'll have a mover and a seconder to go into public excluded. Moved Councillor Hanford, seconded Councillor Warwick. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, that's carried.